You know, fear is what's kept the world from being destroyed, basically. You know, for years and years during the Cold War, uh, Russia, the United States of America, they had something called mutual assured destruction. And under the mutual assured destruction, the fear on both sides kept us from going into a nuclear holocaust. During all those years, the keepers of these arsenals of weapons of mass destruction had a certain amount of fear and a certain amount of integrity that the part that they were able to hold these weapons all those years, and they still hold these weapons today. Enough to completely obliterate the entire Earth. Actually, it's overkill of the two superpowers, Russia and the United States. Now China's a superpower, and they seem to be doing a pretty good job too. The world isn't blowing up or anything, but it's fear behind the scenes that keeps all of this imbalance in check. Let's open the charts and let's take a look at this. It's called the balance of horror. That's one name for it. Another name is MAD doctrine, MAD, mutual assured destruction, wherein MAD simultaneously translates mad and not mad. Mutually assured destruction in the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union was a coined term to refer to a situation in which a nuclear power, from the first use of nuclear weapons held by the fact that the attack, even after a nuclear first strike, could be even more devastating, a part of the game. The balance of terror is also understood by the Nash equilibrium. The equilibrium of horror does not mean a static equilibrium in which the arms race would have come to a standstill. Rather, the term refers to a dynamic equilibrium in which the mutual threats of atomic arms race prevented the escalation of a hot war. Okay, so there we have it. Now, picture this in your mind. A woman takes her little child to the zoo. Going to have a happy day at the zoo and everything, right? So there's a gorilla cage. And they got these great big silverback mountain gorillas, and some of the males weigh like 800 pounds. They're some of the strongest animals on Earth. They can quite literally grab a tree, a big tree, not a little tree, and snap it in half when you can hear the wood splintering with their hands. They're so strong. Okay? So she goes to the gorilla cage, and she's sitting her little child up on the edge of the cage, so he can get a really good look. He's about 4 years old, and so she's there, and all of a sudden, for one reason or another, she slips and the child falls down into the cage. He falls 12 feet down, and he lands on a big bunch of grass. Say it's one of these like Texas grass, those big, I don't know what they're called. They're great big bushy. He lands on top of a big bunch of grass, so he doesn't hurt himself, and he's sitting there. And this great big silverback, weighs about 850 pounds, comes trotting over and stands right in front of the kid. And he's towering over the kid. I mean, and he gets right there, right in front of the kid, and the kid's sitting there, and the kid's eyes are big and wide, And the kid's tiny compared. The kid might weigh like 40 pounds or something, 4-year-old kid. And the kid's eyes are wide like this, looking at this big mountain gorilla, and the mountain gorilla goes, "Argh!" And the breath hits the kid right in the face. It actually blows the kid's hair, And then the gorilla beats his chest, boom, 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 with his big fists, A show of power and strength. You know what the kid does? He puts his one hand out in front of him, in front of the gorilla's face, and he gives the finger to the gorilla. Okay, now all that was just made up, But picture now, the United States has got the power like that gorilla, and the United States has come down into the Persian Gulf there, right next to Iran, with this. It's like the big, powerful silverback gorilla. I mean, It's got these big warships. It's got an aircraft carrier, a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier in there, and it's got like all kinds of destroyers and submarines and troops and everything else. It's just like the silverback, you know? Well, you got to have fear and respect for the silverback. But now, here yesterday, just not long ago, Iran doesn't have any fear. They're like, they shoot down the airplane that's flying. Okay, it wasn't small. Like a lot of people picture a drone, you know, they picture this little tiny thing. The kids have, you know, the kids play with these little drones. That wasn't what they shot down. This drone was the size of a semi-truck. I got pictures. I was looking at the drone, you know, and a pickup truck was on the runway in front of the drone, you know, and the pickup truck was about 1/8 the size of the drone. The drone was huge. I mean, it's a big, huge drone. It's a great big thing. I mean, people could fly on board it. It is powered. It doesn't require passengers, but passengers could. It's full of equipment. It costs over $120 million. And they knew, when they pushed that launch button in Iran, they knew the ramifications of shooting down that drone. They knew that it could possibly start a war and anger the silverback. Basically, this big strong mountain gorilla. But that's what the United States' force there is like. I'm using it as an example of the United States' force in that area. It's like the power of a silverback. It's like and they're like the little kid, you know? And they're basically, they're giving him the center finger. That's them shooting down the drone. It's like giving the center finger, like, ha! No fear, no fear. Well, it's that fear that keeps the balance of power, that keeps us all the way through the Cold War from everything blowing up. Boom, boom, boom. In a mutually assured destruction. Because if Russia hadn't have been frightened, if Russia had pushed, they would have pushed the button and launched. And if America had been the same way, if they weren't frightened, they'd push the button and launch. Of course, it'd be like suicidal. But if you're not frightened, I mean, if you're not frightened and you got no fear or anything like that, then you go ahead and take an action that a normal person would not take because they're frightened to take that action. They have fear. And like I say, fear is a good thing because it's what's kept us from going to war. Now, I read an interesting article here that I'm going to change over and take a look at. Now that you guys got this in mind, keep this in mind. Now, keep in mind what the Iranians are like. No fear. They had no fear. They launched that missile knowing that it could start a war with America and they could get obliterated by the power, but then they did it anyway. It's the same thing. There's no fear there. They don't have any fear. So, this guy says, from The Independent, he wrote an article today, and it says, let Iran have its nuclear weapons. Yeah, sure, let them build up a big stockpile of them. Do we really want to have a nation that has no fear of mutual assured destruction having a nuclear stockpile? That's a question I want to ask you. Now, you know that Iran shot that, without hesitation, shot that drone down, knowing that it could open Pandora's box and war could flood into their country because of the giant force that's right in their backyard. But they did it anyway. So if they have nuclear weapons, the question would be, would the fear of nuclear holocaust, would the fear of mutually assured destruction enter into their minds before they push the big red button on their nuclear weapons? Or would it just be another case of this, like when they pushed the button for the missile to go up and shoot down that drone? This is something to think about. Do we really want Iran to have a nuclear arsenal? But he says, let Iran have its nuclear weapons. Let them build all they want. Let them build 100. Let them build 200. Let them be as powerful as North Korea. He says it would make the world safer for us all. You know, today when I read that, it says it would make the world safer for us all. I thought about the Iranians pushing the button to launch the missile, to blow up the drone, right? Knowing that that could cause a reaction from the United States to enter into war and blow them up. But they did it anyway. They must have known, they in their minds, they must know that shooting down one of our aircraft could bring a response upon them to blow them to bits. But they went ahead and pushed the button anyway. Now, pretend that button was a nuclear button. Do we really want them having the nuclear button and doing it anyway? Even though they know that they're going to get blown up too? We need responsible nations to hold the nuclear arsenal that have that fear of mutual assured destruction. China has that fear. The United States has that fear. Russia has that fear. Big question mark. Does North Korea have that fear? Does Pakistan have that fear? Does India have that fear? Because these are nuclear nations as well. You know? And do we want Iran to join this club and become a nuclear nation that's bristling with nuclear weapons aimed at America, aimed at Russia, aimed at China, aimed at everybody else in the world except themselves, because they don't point it back at themselves, you know, when they get a nuclear weapon. But this guy here, he says let them have the nuclear weapons. It would make the world a safer place for us all. I think that this is one of the silliest things I've ever heard in my life. It says, drone down, no one hurt. There ain't going to be no war. You know what? Well, he might be right about that just for now. Because I don't think they're going to go to war over the drone because calmer heads prevail. The United States is calmer. The United States has had nuclear weapons all for going all the way back into the 1940s, and they've used them responsibly because their cooler heads prevail, and also they have that fear of destruction and war. They don't want to go to war. Now Iran's fired the first shots. You know what I mean? And they shot down the drone. The United States hasn't. I'm going to tell you, reverse this on the opposite side of the coin. Pretend that the United States has shot down an Iranian aircraft. Would we be sitting here and still no war started? Or would the Iranians already have been trying to do bombing missions and everything else if we had shot down their aircraft? Because shooting down an aircraft generally starts a war, except when calmer heads prevail. Now, the Iranians want to get these nuclear weapons really bad. You know? And so what they're going to do is, they gave it a 10-day countdown. They're going to start enriching uranium like crazy. In the next 10 days, they're going to go over the threshold, and they're going to start enriching uranium. Massive amounts of it. So that they can build not just one thermonuclear weapon, but many. What happens if we wait? What happens if we listen to this guy? We decide to let Iran have nuclear weapons. It will make the world safer for us all, he says. What happens if we go ahead with that and we just back off and let Iran do whatever they want? Well, they're going to build all these nuclear weapons. I'm going to tell you what. If Iran gets a whole bunch of nuclear weapons, the Saudis are going to build a whole bunch of nuclear weapons too. And then we'll have the Saudis bristling with nuclear weapons and Iran bristling with nuclear weapons, both pointed at each other. Is that what we really want? You know? So, you know, there's a lot to think about in this situation. Sometimes you get caught in a bad situation where, I mean, what can you do? You're pushed back into a corner. And the way I see it right now, this administration is getting pushed into a corner on this. Iran is the ones that's pushing them into this corner. Okay, let's take a look at another thing here. Trump. Trump hints at response to Iran shooting down drone. He says, you'll find out. Now, an awful lot of news sources here on YouTube and stuff are saying, okay, we're going to war. We're going to war. You know, like it's automatic. Like it's automatic that we're going to war because Trump said, you'll find out. Well, you know, you'll find out doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go to war with Iran. That's not necessarily what it means when he says you'll find out. Right? You'll find out could also mean that the United States is taking a wait-and-see attitude, and they want to see if things settle down a little bit now, rather than just jumping right into war. You know what I mean? They're taking a wait-and-see. They're probably doing intelligence gathering on Iran's nuclear capabilities. They're probably at the same time right now, they're probably trying to find out just exactly what Iran's going to do in all this situation. And they're assessing the situation. They're assessing the logistics of getting involved in a war in the region. They are calmer, cooler heads than Iran. Iran is just, I mean, Iran's the one that fired the first shot. That's not calm and cool. That is starting something. Don't start something you can't finish. If we take a look at it here, it says, Washington, U.S. President Donald Trump declared Thursday that Iran made a very big mistake in shooting down the United States surveillance drone near the Persian Gulf. But he suggested that it was a foolish error. You notice he didn't say that it was an accident. He said it was an error. In other words, they shouldn't have done it. In other words, a foolish error. But also, in suggesting that it was a foolish error, he's also kind of giving them a little bit of a... I almost sense that he's almost giving them a little bit of a break. But, you know, America's patience is going to wear thin if they keep this up. If they keep shooting down our aircraft, they're not going to get too many more chances. Because even though America has calmer heads, we're not going to be pushed around too much by Iran. We're not going to allow the Strait of Hormuz to be, all the traffic going in and out of there, to be harmed and blown up, and freighters and the shipping lane to be cut off by Iran. And Iran threatened to do that. It's very possible what those limpet mines were all about, that they were attaching to the sides of the ship. Now, it wasn't proven that Iran was doing that, but the finger points at Iran. And Iran said that they were going to cut off the Strait of Hormuz. And then all of a sudden we see these ships blowing up. You know, big fires coming out of these tanker ships. Well, I think the American government has been very long-suffering up until this point. One strike, you know, that's the mines on the sides of the ships. That airplane flying over, that they just shot down that drone, that's strike 2. I'm going to tell you right now, if they go for strike 3, 3 strikes in baseball, what happens? You know? I don't think the United States is going to take too much more of this stuff. Iran Revolutionary Guard shoots down a United States drone that cost the United States taxpayers $120 million. It was a perfectly good drone. It was doing its service, and from what I understand, it was in international waters when they shot it down. It says on Thursday, Iran called the sanctions economic terrorism, insisted that the drone had invaded its airspace, and said it would take its case to the United Nations in an effort to prove the United States was lying about where the aircraft was. Well, you know, this is just a mess over there right now. I hope it doesn't turn into war. But we're going to have to wait and see. I can tell you who's been the patient side in all of this, who's taken the abuse so far, you know, and it's not been Iran. Now, we're going to have to wait and see how much more patient that the president is with the Iranian forces trying to cut off the oil supply to the world. Okay, listen, thank you guys for listening. One of the points I want to make is I think that I'm not sure about this. What I'm going to say next, I'm not sure about. I'm very unsure about it. But I think there's a strong possibility that the United States is going to let this one go. I think there's a strong possibility of that. I'm certainly not sure about it. But I think it's a strong possibility the United States just might let this one go if Iran doesn't do any more garbage. You know? Now, I'm not sure about that. They might not let it go. We're going to have to wait a little while to find out if they let it go. You know, but that's the feeling I'm getting, that they're going to let this one go. But if Iran does anything more in there, any more crap, and I would say that it's going to be all she wrote. You know what I mean? Listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye.